So I'll preface this by saying what I'm going to cover in this video, I recognize sounds a little bit crazy. And I don't mean it literally, although I do think in theory, in principle, in concept, it holds. But I recognize up front that it might be a little bit out there. So with that preface, what I want to talk about is the dual aspects of the mind, kind of the two entities that exist in our mind, not literally, figuratively. And it's probably worth noting as well that there's a number of books that I've read from neuroscientists and psychologists, etc., that believe there are kind of two working functions of the mind. There's the more passive, not even more passive, the more subconscious, that's processing behind the scenes kind of all the time. It does kind of the automatic work. Some of that, again, I'm getting into a science that I don't want to delve into, but some of that is like breathing and the basic functions, but also from a thinking perspective, which is what I care more about. You drive up to a red light, you just stop. It goes green, you just go. It's not conscious, you're not thinking about it. Then there's the conscious part of the mind that's more deep thinking and analytical and in theory, right? There's all those different views on that. So that's what I want to talk about, the two parts of the mind. But I want to talk about a dynamic that I think happens between them that I think is extremely relevant to the things I talk about in these videos and how we function. So what do I think? I think there's a conscious portion of the mind and there's a subconscious portion of the mind. I think that there are differences between those in a number of different ways, and I want to talk about some of those. So let's start with the conscious mind. So that's what we're aware of. That's our thinking when we're actively thinking and producing thoughts. And we literally follow a logical chain, about something. What do I want for dinner? Well, I'm hungry, so maybe I want pizza, but I just had pizza last week, so maybe I'll have this, right? That's our conscious mind. Our conscious mind is working towards different objectives, stated objectives. Typically, those are based on our values and our beliefs, and we try and use that to guide us in how we think and ultimately the actions that we take, right? That's how we think of it. And for many of us, the conscious mind is really what we know and believe exists. I think for many people, they believe, yeah, that's predominantly what it is. If not 100%, 90% of what our mind does and how we come up with ideas and thoughts and decisions is driven by our conscious thought and minds. There's probably a portion of us that understand that there's probably some subconscious that's at play there, but the impact that it has, most probably believe is relatively low. That's not what I believe. I believe that second portion of the mind, the subconscious portion, is actually extremely impactful and drives a lot of what we do. That second portion, the subconscious portion of the mind, I think is more base level. It's not that it's stupid. It's not that it's illogical. And you'll see in a minute, I'll explain. I actually think it's quite the opposite. But it functions on more of a base level as humans, as animals. What I would say its objective is, right? So remember, the conscious mind has like value systems and morals and all different stated objectives that it works towards. The subconscious mind, I believe, its stated objective or its objective, what it's designed to do, what it's programmed to do, is the base driver in us. It's meant to maximize comfort or pleasure and minimize discomfort or pain, right? Same side of the other coin. That's what it's intended to do. Maximize pleasure, minimize pain. I mean that in kind of the generic form. It might not literally be physical pain. Any discomfort it's trying to eliminate. Any comfort, that's what it's going towards. So that's what it's designed to do. There's some attributes about the subconscious mind. So it's designed to do that. It does that, and it does it really, really well. It's robotic, machine-like, right, computer-like in its ability to do that. It assesses things extremely quickly, and it identifies very quickly what's going to bring us comfort versus discomfort. And it always goes towards the comfort. It does that, I think, right? Somebody might ask, well, why is it designed that way? Why is it doing that? My personal hypothesis, I can't, back this up with any data or science yet, but just logically it would make sense, might be true. When you think of us as humans in our evolution, hundreds of thousands, millions of years that we've been evolving, it's a small portion that we've been, functioning the way in which we think of humans in societies and civilizations, etc. So our mind was more or less designed to focus its energy and its resources on the base things, eating, surviving, procreating, etc. All of the stuff that we've gotten into on a social level and all the nuance and complex things that we get into, our brain wasn't necessarily designed for that. It's not the foremost function. So this comfort versus discomfort, pain versus pleasure, there's an efficiency to it. What the subconscious mind is trying to do is to say, hey, all that stuff doesn't really matter in many ways. So we're just going to solve for that in the simplest, easiest way, right? So when it's making decisions, it's trying to just solve for that simply. What it ends up doing often is it uses its number one tool that it has as its disposal, which is it can create narratives. It's super influential. It's super good, I guess, for lack of a better word, at taking a situation, identifying what's going to bring comfort and what's going to bring discomfort, and convincing our conscious mind, who's actually then going to take the action, that the path towards comfort is the right path, that that's the thing you should do. In many ways, that's what our subconscious is completely designed for, and it's amazing at doing it, right? So if you're going to go for a run and get in shape and exercise, we've all been there, right? Your subconscious mind behind the scenes is doing all this work to say, well, that's going to bring some pain and discomfort. Running's no fun. Start next Monday, start after the new year. Your ankle's been bothering you, hold off on it, right? All the things that are processing, that are telling us. And those are the ideas that pop into our conscious mind and say, I shouldn't do that because of my ankle, right? And this is where it starts to get wacky, why my preface came in. There's a duality, right? This idea, what we feel is that our conscious mind realized our ankle hurts, so we're not going to do it in this case. What I'm proposing, hypothesis, is that it's actually this subconscious mind that's teeing up that idea, but doing it in such a way that it feels like we own it and we're taking that action and we made that decision. But it's actually behind the scenes doing these calculations to maximize comfort, minimize discomfort. And it's, again, so good at it. It's smarter. It's better than our conscious mind at that, right? It knows our weaknesses. It knows how we think. It knows where our flaws are in our mind. It knows what's going to work for us. It knows what narrative it needs to craft to get us to buy into it and say, yeah, that makes sense. I can't run. My ankle hurts. It's so good at that. So in many ways, you'd say, well, subconscious mind's making all the decisions. Ultimately, it's pulling the strings behind the scenes. But maybe that's okay because it seems like it's really good. It's really good in the moment. It's good second to second, minute to minute. That's what it's constantly analyzing. In this next minute, what's going to bring me pain versus pleasure? And I'm going to optimize for that. It's short-sighted. It has no ability to look seemingly long-term and identify what's going to bring me more pleasure, more comfort in the long run, over years or a lifetime. It doesn't think that way. It thinks short-term, step by step by step. So that's why it's relevant, because your conscious mind, which is much better at thinking long-term and seeing that, is almost at the whim of the subconscious mind. If it can't identify and know that that's happening, and that's kind of the sick trick in this, is that for most of us, as I said, we assume we're in control. We assume the conscious mind is making all these decisions, but it's not. So we don't even think to check. We just assume it's all good, which allows the subconscious mind the free rein to do all the things, to convince us to make these decisions that are short-sighted, right? And that's obviously a problem. So it's relevant. We need to understand it. We need to see it. And we need to figure out ways to counteract that. This gets to things I've talked about, right? The checkmate form of questioning, the removing cognitive outs. That's what it's doing. It's trying to take the subconscious mind and it's looking for all these outs. It's looking for all this flex in the system, as I've spoken about, so that when it runs into an issue where it sees discomfort might be coming, it can pivot, it can spin, it can change the narrative, convince us of something, whatever it has to do, get defensive, right? Get angry, whatever it needs to do its job, which is to minimize discomfort in that next moment. Full circle. This brings me to the two things I always talk about in these videos. I talk about an Drogo, kind of thinking better, being more logical, big L logical, right, as one, and mental toughness as the second. To me, those are the two things that combat the subconscious mind. Those are the two things that on situations or topics or things that matter will allow you to let your conscious mind step in and check the subconscious. Doesn't mean the subconscious is wrong always, but you want to check. You know it's not aligned. It's not programmed to think big picture and long term. So you need to check it. The way you check it is A, mathematically logical type thinking, right? Where you don't allow for those cognitive outs because you're being so analytical and logical about it. If the subconscious mind is crafting some sort of story, you will spot it because you're following a logical path. It doesn't work. It doesn't fly. If you're being passive in your conscious mind and you're letting it have free reign, it could spin up any story and it'll seem like it makes sense. But once you start to dig, you see the flaws, you see it falls apart. Logical thinking, mathematical thinking, critical. Piece two, though, is the mental toughness to when you, first of all, to be able to accept it when you see that the subconscious mind is breaking bad in some way. But two, to take action to overcome it, to beat it, right? To actually do the hard thing, face the discomfort because it's better in the long term. So I could talk much more about this. I want to stop for sake of time, but this concept of the subconscious versus the conscious, that the subconscious mind is kind of pulling the strings behind the scenes, not in any malicious way necessarily, but it's doing what it's programmed to do, minimize discomfort, maximize pleasure. And we need to be aware of that because that doesn't always align with the objectives of our conscious mind, not in the long term, not in the big picture.